Welcome back to the cryptowrld channel, everyone. My name is Josh, and right now it is happening. Bitcoin is playing out the squeeze in the short term to wipe out this exact level of liquidity, which has now happened. And we now have new price targets to watch out for on this Bitcoin price chart right here. But while this is happening, the US stock market is also remaining in this same sideways price range, bouncing between support and resistance, which means we need to be careful about this next move coming soon for the price of Bitcoin. So I'll be talking about that in just a moment alongside Ethereum, which is still perfectly bouncing around within this range right here, while the price of XRP is continuing to hold above this crucial area of support on the price chart. So I'll be talking about all of that and more later in the video, so definitely watch to the end. First of all, just before taking a look at the Bitcoin and crypto charts today, taking a quick look at the US stock market today. This is the S&P 500 index on the 1 hour time frame, and over the last one day, we opened well below the previous close. In other words, in the after hours trading and pre-market, we did indeed see a major drop just in the short term, but then throughout the trading day, we basically recovered that entire drop and basically saw a decent bounce just in the short term, which is remaining in this larger sideways price range that we've been in basically all year so far for the S&P 500 index, bouncing from this support and rejecting from this resistance. And so obviously we could see short-term bullish moves, short-term bearish moves, but for the most part, this is still just making up a sideways price range, as we can see, bouncing around relatively sideways on the price chart, which means we'll likely see something similar to this for Bitcoin and crypto. So keep that in mind throughout the video. And if we're taking a look at the Bitcoin price chart, looking at the weekly time frame, the super trend indicator is still sitting in the red, indicating a larger bear market or a larger correction. And if we're taking a look at this weekly Bitcoin price chart, we still have a massive bearish divergence, technically still actively playing out. But with that being said, we're also potentially just now beginning to play out an oversold signal in the weekly Bitcoin RSI for the first time since around the middle of 2022. Now, keep in mind, an oversold signal by itself does not guarantee that this is the bottom. For example, the last time we saw this signal confirmed, once again around June 2022 and July 2022, ultimately, yes, we did see a decent relief following that signal, a bit of a bullish movement, but ultimately we actually created another lower low later on. It was not the entire end of the larger bearish trend, but it was getting close towards the end. And so that is still the situation on the weekly time frame. Not a lot changed over the last one day. And if we're taking a look at the 3-day time frame, obviously during this larger bearish trend, we're still just bouncing around it relatively sideways in a bit of a sideways price range, exactly as predicted over the last few weeks here. And right now, this is still the case. Once again, not much changed here on the 3-day time frame. We're still playing out the oversold signal on the 3-day Bitcoin RSI, which means we're likely going to remain just chopping around relatively sideways as a very likely scenario, potentially still in a similar situation right now compared to what we saw near the end of 2025, entering into early this year. And if we're taking a look at the short-term moves for the price of Bitcoin here on the 2-hour time frame, obviously over the last one day, we saw another short-term bullish move, but this is just ultimately undoing the previous bearish movements, which are undoing the previous bullish moves, so on and so forth, which is basically what a sideways price range is, just chopping around relatively sideways on the price chart. So obviously, this is still all playing out as predicted. Not much changed over the last one day. Once again, this choppy sideways price action contains both short-term bullish moves and, of course, short-term bearish moves. And another reason as to why we saw that short-term bullish move over the last one day, just recently here on the price chart, is, of course, due to the fact that we saw massive liquidity building above the price of Bitcoin, which I talked about in my last video before this move happened. I said, basically, watch out for this area in between around 68.2K to 68.4K, give or take, as a major price target to watch out for. And obviously, over the last one day, this has now officially been wiped out. We've now obviously moved up towards that liquidity to wipe out that liquidity. So keep in mind that level's no longer there. We've already hit that level, taken out that level. But with that being said, we have new liquidity to watch out for, building at around 70.1K to 70.3K. And now it is worth pointing out that we still have a bit of liquidity down here as well, at give or take 62,500 to 63,000. But with that being said, most of the liquidity that's actually close to the price of Bitcoin Bitcoin is this area at just above 70,000, as I just mentioned. And so this is suggesting, as always, no guarantees, but this is suggesting that it's likely at some stage soon we could ultimately hit that level of liquidity towards the upside, not necessarily right this instant, but maybe within the next couple of days, potentially expect that sort of movement as a likely scenario. But remember, we're still in a sideways price range for the time being alongside the US stock market. In fact, in the post market right here, after the market's closed, we're currently seeing a slight little drop in the US stock market, which is helping to cause just a very slight little drop in the price of Bitcoin. And so this is why I said in the intro of the video, we have to be careful about these short-term bullish moves, because at least for now, that's all they are, just short-term moves during a sideways price range, bouncing around sideways. So we have to acknowledge the fact that we are getting closer towards the upper end of the range, the strong resistance here. As we can see right here, we're getting closer towards the upper end of the sideways price range. Meanwhile, for example, the short-term RSI on the smaller time frames getting closer towards overbought, not there just yet, but moving closer in that direction, which means we're potentially approaching the upper side, the upper limit of this short-term bullish move, which means maybe soon enough, within the next few days, maybe even after we take out that liquidity towards the upside, we could soon start to see another shorter-term bearish move to basically just continue bouncing around in this sideways price range. And so once again, understand the difference between the different time frames. The much larger time frame still ultimately looking bearish, not yet fully confirmed any reversal. The somewhat midterm, if you want to call it that, talking about a period of weeks, if not maybe a month, give or take, ultimately looking very neutral, bouncing around in the sideways price range, which of course in the short term is made up of these short-term bullish moves and short-term bearish moves. And so those are my expectations across these different time frames here, and the key levels and signals to watch out for moving forward for the price of Bitcoin. And of course that caution, just to basically be a little bit careful with this short-term bullish move, because soon we're approaching the high end, the higher side of the sideways price range, which is typically where we start to see the price turn around at. And if you want to trade these moves in the price of Bitcoin or any crypto, you need to be set up ready to go on a crypto exchange. And if you use the first link below the video in the description and in the pinned comment, that first link below this video will take you to this page right here over on the 2bit crypto exchange, which is an exchange that I personally use myself. And by the way, it's also a no KYC exchange. And currently, right this moment, they're celebrating their 3rd birthday event, which means there's a $3.5 million USD prize pool here up for grabs, simply just by trading crypto using that first link below the video. So obviously, if you're going to be trading crypto anyway, or preparing to take the next trading opportunity, you might as well get set up, ready to go, take advantage of this using that first link below the video. And remember, 2bit is also a no KYC exchange. But with that being said, taking a quick look at the Bitcoin dominance chart on the daily time frame, and right now in the imminent short term, we're playing out a slight little bullish move, but for the most part, we're still basically chopping around relatively sideways for the Bitcoin dominance. So in terms of the trend or the momentum, still looking somewhat neutral here, not overly bullish or overly bearish, which means a lot of the major altcoins out there on average will still likely be performing very similar to whatever Bitcoin is doing. So keep that in mind. And if we're taking a look at Ethereum on the 3-day time frame, obviously we're seeing something very similar for Ethereum as what we're seeing for Bitcoin on the 3-day time frame, which means of course the larger multi-month trend is technically still bearish. We've not yet fully confirmed the end or the reversal out of that trend, but the somewhat short to mid-term situation is that we're still just bouncing around relatively sideways in a sideways price range, which is exactly what I predicted every day over the last few weeks for almost a month now since this local low down here. And so all of that still playing out on the 3-day time frame, playing out this oversold signal, continuing to consolidate sideways, potentially still in a similar situation to what we saw back here during the larger bearish trend. And if we're taking a look at the daily Ethereum price chart, it's very much clear that we're bouncing between this Fibonacci level of support and this Fibonacci level of resistance. First of all, this support is still sitting at just above 1.8k, around 1810 to 1820 as a key level of support to watch out for. And we have strong resistance at just above 2.1k, more specifically around 2150, starting as strong resistance. And if we're zooming much further into the short term here, taking a look at just the 2-hour Ethereum price chart, once again, it's a very similar situation for Ethereum as what I just said for Bitcoin on the 2-hour time frame, which means, yes, we're playing out a bullish move, but be careful because we're very close towards the higher side, the high end of this sideways price range. Now, obviously, we're not there just yet, which means, yes, it's possible we could go a little higher, but just be cautious right now because we've already played out a short-term bullish move. We're approaching the highs, which is typically around this area where we start to see the price turn around at. So keep that in mind. Once again, just have a bit of caution right now in the short term in terms of the short-term moves. Remember, short-term moves flip between bullish and bearish very often, very quickly here, but all of these short-term moves are just making up a bit of a sideways price range, which for now has been lasted for mostly a month, for over the last 1 month or so. And so all of that's still playing out on these different time frames here. Just be cautious in the short term once again. And if we're taking a look at Solana on the 3-day time frame, it's a similar situation for Solana as what I said for Bitcoin and Ethereum, also on the 3-day time frame. The larger multi-month trend technically still bearish, but just in the somewhat short to mid-term here relative to the 3-day time frame, still consolidating sideways, bouncing around in a bit of a sideways price range here. Of course, we still have strong support sitting in between $75 to $80. We have some short-term resistance at pretty much exactly $90 and strong resistance in between $95 to $105. And if we're zooming further to the short term, taking a look at the 2-hour Solana price chart, it's basically the same story here for Solana as what I said for Bitcoin and Ethereum. But in this situation, we also have a bearish divergence, which is just starting to confirm for the price of Solana. Of course, we have officially confirmed higher highs in the price in the candle closes, and we're now, as I'm recording this video, just starting to confirm lower highs in the 2-hour Solana RSI, which means, of course, it's the opposite to a bullish divergence. And as we can see here, typically from a bullish divergence, we usually see some sort of bullish movement, not necessarily always a huge bullish move, sometimes just a slight bullish relief and then more bearish price action later on. But right now we're seeing the opposite. Once again, a bearish divergence, which means, yes, it is quite likely we could play out just a slight bearish move here in the short term, either a decent bearish move or maybe just a slight bearish move. But either way, just be cautious right now in terms of the short-term moves. Remember, these short-term moves flip very often between bullish and bearish. Right now, because we're at the high end of the range, be cautious. We could soon start to flip a little bit more bearish in terms of the short-term moves, but overall still just bouncing around in a bit of a sideways price range on this time frame right here. And if we're taking a look at the price of XRP on the weekly time frame, technically speaking, the larger or longer term bearish trend is still in place right now. We've not yet fully confirmed the end or the reversal out of this larger bearish trend. So we're still playing out this massive bearish divergence here, but just in the somewhat shorter term, we're still running into and holding this crucial area of support here, still sitting in between $1.30 to $1.40. So continue to expect support in that area, as I've been saying for a long time now on the channel. In fact, I've been targeting $1.30 to $1.40 since basically the price was well above $2 when no one else out there pretty much was talking about these prices. I was talking about expect strong support here from all the way back up here is when I started saying that. But with that being said, if we actually confirm a break below $1.30 with, for example, a weekly candle close below that level, and especially if we fail to get back above that level, in that situation, the next target would be sitting at around $1.13. And below that, the next massive area of support is in between around 90 cents to $1. But if we're zooming into the 3-day XRP price chart, we're also still trying to play out this oversold signal in the 3-day time frame, which means, yes, it's likely we'll continue a little bit more choppy sideways price action in the coming days or possibly weeks here. But like I just said throughout the video, in terms of the very short-term moves on much smaller time frames, we could perhaps see just a slight little bearish move right now for a lot of the crypto market, basically just in the coming hours, maybe over the next 1 day. Be a little bit cautious if we're talking about the imminent short-term moves, but ultimately somewhat neutral if we're talking about, let's just say, the next week or so. And if we're taking a look at the price of Chainlink on the 3-day time frame, it's a similar situation for Chainlink. Obviously, the larger or longer term multi-month bearish trend is still the case. We're still within this trend. We've not yet fully confirmed the end or the reversal out of this trend. But with that being said, in the somewhat short to mid-term, we're still playing out this oversold signal in the 3-day Chainlink RSI, which means most likely more choppy sideways price action still to come, bouncing around in this same sideways price range as I've been talking about for weeks now on the channel. First of all, this support is still sitting in between around $7.90 to $8.50, and this resistance is still sitting in between $9.50 to $10. And if we're zooming further into the short term, taking a look at the 2-hour Chainlink price chart, it's a very similar situation here as what I just said for Solana. Obviously, we potentially have a slight little bearish divergence here. Obviously, we have almost horizontal highs in the RSI while having higher highs confirmed in the price, which is a form of a divergence. It's not a perfect bearish divergence. Ideally, a Great bearish divergence would be higher highs in the price, lower highs in the RSI, but this is still a weaker form of a bearish divergence. But either way, considering what I've been saying throughout the video for Bitcoin and all of these other crypto assets, approaching the top side of these areas of basically the sideways price range right here, approaching the high end of the sideways price range. Once again, we're not there just yet, which means it's possible we could have just a slight little bullish move before starting the next little turnaround, but just be cautious right now in the short term. And so right now, I'm saying the same thing for Chainlink. Be cautious in terms of the short-term move, but overall, we're still just bouncing around in this same sideways price range, bouncing between support and resistance. And so those are my expectations and the key levels to watch out for moving forward for Chainlink and all of these crypto assets. And of course, if you want to trade at Chainlink or any one of these crypto assets here, check out the links below this video to those exchanges if you want to take advantage of massive bonuses only available using those links to certain exchanges. And if you want to actually know how you can trade these moves, no matter what direction the price goes, then make sure to watch these videos popping up right here on your screen, because the video in the top left shows you how you can profit from bullish or bearish price action using long positions or short positions, and the video in the bottom left shows you how you can easily profit from choppy sideways price action. But anyway, that is everything that I have to say for today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.